I've met Fernando and I've met Pooya in Iran and in other places. And you talk, and it's kind of quite a nice moment to bring people together and have a chat and actually see what people are doing in a bit more detail. And I guess one thing that connects us to nomadism in a very wide way is that we are quite interested in mobility and in how things manifest themselves slowly, in a way. So in using temporary structures or strategies as ways to think places quite slowly, or settlements. And I guess that's nomadism is another extreme of not settling, or maybe. So it's quite nice to have Pooya here, who's doing research on, well, who worked as an architect, is a trained architect, worked in Iran and Dubai, and you've seen that extreme, and I think that turned you to look at the nomadism as a kind of counter idea. So it comes from the practice of an architect, which I quite like, and Fernando, who's an artist living in Madrid, but moving everywhere, but also has a shop. You have a shop in Madrid, and you have lots of other locations in Spain where you do things. But it's really from the practice of an artist where nomadism is one aspect within your practice, I would think. But for me it was quite interesting, since we are an art and architecture collaboration, to see where these two positions meet.
As an architect, I was disillusioned with the built environment in Dubai, the most unsustainable development on the face of earth other than China nowadays. I thought I should do, as Andreas said, I should search for another alternative, a radically different alternative, especially when I was living in Dubai. I saw lots of people in a transient situation, moving through Dubai and all temporary, and I thought maybe there are potentials for a new form of nomadism here. So, the nomadism that I'm looking at, although I worked with pastoral nomads in Iran for a while to be able to learn from them, is more an idea that is trans-historical. That is the theoretical claim that I'm working on, saying nomadism is a trans-historical and it's an analytical concept. It applies to different stages in history as much as it was valid to analyze the social, political, economical situation of the past. It can also be used nowadays to explain what's happening around us and to form movements, resistance, not only to study but also to act upon. Here I'm using to start theories that were developed by the 14th century. They called him the first social scientist, Ibn Khaldun, and also in modern times, Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari. Ibn Khaldun's idea was that in order to write history, he decided to develop methods of analyzing how human civilization and society works. And he came up with this concept of asabiya. Asabiya is what makes all the difference between nomadic and sedentary communities in Ibn Khaldun's terms. It means group solidarity in his definition. He says nomads keep their asabiya alive, whereas sedentary urban people, he calls them urban and Bedouin. He's part of the Islamic empire of the time, born in Tunisia, and traveling here and there, and nowadays buried in Spain. With this idea of asabiya, he explains a kind of engine for evolution of society, like a yin and yang thing. Nomads occupy sedentary territories, the urban areas, use their asabiya, spend their asabiya to make sophisticated monuments of culture, institutions, sedentary institutions, sophisticated sedentary arts, technology. All of these things are made using their asabiya, and after a while they go corrupt. As he says, their nature turns yellow, and they are toppled up by a nomadic tribe with a strong willpower of asabiya, more in tune and in harmony with nature, and that's his whole.
What does asabiya mean again?
Asabiya means group solidarity, but the word asab in Arabic, as much as I know a little bit of Arabic, means nerves. So it seems like there's a nervous system, in my opinion, a nervous system connecting all the tribal group. It's not necessarily about blood ties, it's about the whole, if you go down, I go down with you. Solidarity. In modern times, Deleuze and Guattari, two postmodern philosophers, talk about the concept of nomadology and creating this philosophy saying the state is a system that is oppressive in nature, creates spaces that are striated. I will explain that a bit further later on, and easy to monitor for surveillance and control, basically. And nomads live in soft spaces, which is always undermining the authority of the state, and again, a bit further, I will explain their idea. The theories of Ibn Khaldun and Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari are using as historical examples the steppe nomads that have horse and Bedouin nomads that are mainly camel herders. But I'm adding a bit more nuances, good for you, the sheep and goat nomads. The difference between sheep and goat nomads, which in the Iranian plateau and the countries around it are the prevalent form of nomadism, they're prime animal. You can define the 5 different types of nomads around the world, according to Barfield, to yak herders of Himalaya, steppe horse nomads of Mongolia and Eurasia, sheep and goat nomads, because in Zagros Mountains in Iranian plateau was the first place where sheep and goat were domesticated. And their prime animal is sheep and goats. And then camel herders in Arabia and northern Africa, and cattle herders of Africa.
And Europe?
He doesn't really count the Lapa and other. These are the main 5 types of pastoral nomads around the world. The others are possibly too small to be counted in his categorization. Of course, in every categorization you lose some nuances. But the point is, Ibn Khaldun and Deleuze and Guattari both focus on pure forms of nomadism. Why? Because Mongols and Bedouins, because of their animals and because of the type of pasture they use, live very far from sedentary areas. Whereas sheep and goat pastures are so similar to agricultural farmlands that geographically you find them intermingled, interlaced with sedentary urban and village societies. That makes them much less romantic and more businesslike. They live in a constant situation of conflict and coexistence with sedentary societies. Whereas the others, like when the Maasai come to town or when the Bedouin come to town, they all say like, oh, look at them, the nomads are coming, take your stuff away, and they're a bit scary, lots of stories, romantic stories, they don't know much about one another, but always the nomads, the sheep and goat nomads are much more linked to sedentary societies, and there are lots of interactions. They affect the architecture of the city, and their whole political and institutional system takes after the sedentary society as well. That's why it's called dimorphic. The 2 shapes are mixed with one another. This is Iran, and you can see wherever in Iran that you find civilization around the main desert in the center of Iran, wherever you find civilization, you can also find migration paths, which shows the existence of nomads in Iran. So this is a proof of this dimorphic.
The blue are migration paths.
The blue are migration paths, yes.
And in the middle is
the 2 main deserts of Iran, yes. The central desert and the Lut desert.
So they're not
Here,
entering the
here.
desert.
They are in the border of the desert normally and in the mountain foots, mountain skirts.
Valleys.
Do you know of any idea of numbers of the tribes? Because, for example, I heard the Qashqai were even 200,000 people.
Yes, nowadays the number of nomads in Iran is about, there are lots of different counts, but something between 1.2 million to 2 million, 1.5 million. Different definitions give dramatically different numbers.
So it's quite substantial still.
It is. It's about 2% of the population nowadays. But I will further explain it that the absolute numbers is the same as it was a century ago. Going back to the idea of Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, I've tried to explain their idea in a dimorphic society by this 3D diagram. The soft spaces are these cloudy, fluffy shapes, and the striated space that I will explain a bit further, the space that the state creates and recreates. In a dimorphic society, in parts of the geography, the soft spaces on top is dominating, and in parts of it, the hard space, for sake of simplicity, the striated space is on the top, is dominating. What does the striated space mean? The term striated comes from when glaciers move in their U-shaped valleys down, when they slide down, they scratch the stones in parallel lines, like marks of your finger on a blackboard, let's say. And these parallel lines create a kind of coordinates for the space to be defined, to be easily monitored, controlled. If you move from point A to point B, they can easily tell where you were and where you are right now. We can see it right now in London, for example, with all the systems, the passport you have, the credit card you're using, the CCTV cameras, the laws, the institutions, the built environment, all of them are tools for creating striated space, and the striated space, according to Deleuze and Guattari, wants to expand itself and conquer the world, basically. On the other hand, nomads live in soft spaces, the space that is defined by lines of flight. There are no points there, and these two are inherently in opposition to one another. Soft space wants to occupy. In terms of a dimorphic society, the conflict and coexistence that this diagram wants to show, 6 months of the year, if you look at it temporally, nomads are in conflict with rural societies and urban societies, because if they graze the farms when the farms are green, they might even, quarrels may end up in shooting one another. And if the agricultural people, if the farmers till the rangelands, again, feuds will be really disastrous. But the rest of the year, 6 months of the year, they need to graze the stubbles, the remainders of the harvest. They rent their fields after they harvest it, and also nomads need to buy their staple grains from, so they do a lot of trading in these dimorphic societies. But what's happening in between these two, those are splinter tribes, which later on I will use in this model. The splinter tribes are basically the outcast, thrown out of the nomadic soft spaces and from striated space, and somehow in between, loosely, and they can be merged, amalgamated to one another to create big changes in history if these parasocial elements find a parasocial leader to unite them with one another.